A quick disclaimer before we begin. The PEMF podcast does not contain any medical advice, and the content provided is for informational purposes only. If you have any health concerns, please visit a healthcare professional. Welcome back to another episode of the PEMF podcast, and today's guest is an absolute legend in the fight world, former UFC middleweight contender, Ultimate Fighter Season 1 veteran, coach, and all-round warrior, Chris the Crippler Leben. From growing up in chaos to becoming one of UFC's most unforgettable fighters and then nearly losing everything to addiction, now several years sober and fully focused on his gym, we'll talk about his recovery and performance and the tools that he's using today, which obviously includes PEMF therapy. Included in that, we've got dry sauna, other methods that keep him both him and his athletes performing and healing at the high level. Chris, just take us all the way back. Let's go back to your childhood. You grew up in Portland with a pretty rough upbringing. Can you talk about what your early life was and how fighting kind of came into that picture?
Yeah, I grew up kind of on the wrong side of the tracks, I suppose, is the nice way of putting it. Single mother. There was a lot of drug abuse in my household as a child that I grew up around, and my older brother was an asshole, so he kind of picked on me. He would have that he's the reason I became a UFC fighter because he made me tough. He likes to tell the world that, but I think that just kind of started, the moving me in that direction, and ultimately I found, I started boxing in middle school, and then in high school I found wrestling, and to be perfectly honest, I think that being part of that wrestling team is the only reason I ever graduated high school at all. So, the camaraderie of the team and yeah, it just happened to be, when it came to wrestling and boxing, they happened to be things that I wasn't terrible at, so kind of to fast forward a little bit, after high school, not exactly college bound. So, I found my brother called me one day. He was a used car salesman now. So he calls me, says, "Hey, Randy Couture and Matt Lindland are kicking the shit out of each other in the garage," and that ultimately ended up being Team Quest, which is where I started. Matt Lindland and Randy Couture were both world champions at the time. So I just happened to, grow up, in the perfect spot. So I had this, one of the first MMA gyms was in Rockwood, Oregon, which, was my backyard. Not the most pleasant place, the world champ, we're beating the crap out of each other in a mechanic's garage. So, I walked in, met my coach, Robert Paulus, and kind of said, "Sign me up, let's go," and for a kid, they kind of grew up with not a lot. They, like I said, they kind of grew up on the wrong side of the tracks, for me, fighting was, once I had that first fight and people kind of gave me some respect or at least knew my name. I remember back then, this is 100 years ago. So back then there were some boards, where people were online actually talking about me. And to me, that was like, wow, these people know who I am and stuff. And I was hooked. And that was it. So from that point forward, from that first fight forward, I kind of just dedicated my life to the sport.
Yeah. And was fighting ever in your family as well? I know you said that, your brother used to pick on you and things, but is there any kind of history of fighting within the ranks, granddads, anything like that? Or was this was a kind of new entity?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know. I don't know too much about my family. I know my mom and my mom's brothers a little bit. None of them were fighters. But that's pretty much it. I couldn't tell you my genealogy. Couldn't go back very far. It's my what's that joke? My genealogy is kind of like a totem pole.
Yeah, and because you didn't have a big relationship with your father, did you? Growing up,
no, not
any kind of relationship with your father.
Not at all. I didn't meet him until I think I was 22 years old, trying out for the Ultimate Fighter. The first time I met him, ended up meeting him at the bar in the MGM, and he borrowed $100 from me. That was the first time I met him.
That's the first time.
Yeah.
And you kind of talking about your childhood again. No father around. Your mum was struggling with addiction at the time. There must have been quite a bit of a chaotic upbringing at the time. Do you think that shaped, the Ultimate Fighter that you become? Did that have an impact on the either just getting into it or?
Yeah, definitely. You had to be tough in the world that I grew up in. You really didn't want to show too much weakness. And besides that, I didn't have many other options. Like I said, I didn't have, I wasn't great in school. College, there was no, scholarships that were being thrown my way. My mom certainly wasn't going to help me pay for school, so, fighting was, for me, it was something I was good at. 2, it was a feasible option. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time where, being where Team Quest had just started, and 3, I liked it. I enjoyed it. And it gave me a sense of accomplishment, for a kid that's destined to be nothing, that's destined to pump gas and be, whatever. No, my teachers and everybody else had more or less written off my future. I was, learning disabled. I grew up, I was dyslexic. I didn't really learn how to, well, that's kind of a funny story in itself. I didn't really learn how to read or write much until after high school. It wasn't until MySpace came out, trying to get laid, that I figured out how to read and write. But I guess that shows you when the motivation is there. It's the right motivation is there, you can do anything. But yeah, and then, to get that notoriety and stuff for me, at the time, everything I did was spite, was to prove, that I was worthy, to prove that I was somebody, and not necessarily to everybody else. Probably a 20-year-old Chris even was trying to prove that to himself. I was trying to prove that I wasn't destined to be a loser like the rest of my family, like everybody else that I came up with. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So I mean, you're surrounded by this chaos, and you almost don't want to become what was around you. So did you see fighting as more of a route out of all of this?
I suppose I didn't look at it that deeply, that like at the time at 20 years old, that it was a route out. Ultimately, it was a route out. Ultimately, fighting saved my life for sure. I had to get, it did a lot of things for me. I had to sober up to fight, which probably saved my life. I couldn't get in too much trouble if I wanted to fight. Can't be in jail, so it kept me from doing, a lot of the things that the other people in my neighborhood were doing, truly fighting saved my life. And at the time, I don't know that I thought of it as a way out as much as just a way to get respect. It wasn't until later that, being in the gym, being around these other men that, because not having a father, I had, having Robert Falls and Randy Couture and Matt Lindland, the generation before me of fighters, those are the ones that I looked up to. Those are the guys that, in a lot of ways, were like father figures to me. I didn't have anybody else to model who I was off of, so by being able to model who I was off of these men, it took me out of the ghetto. It took me from modeling who I was off my family and the people around me in my living situation, which would have been not good.
So yeah, just 22 years old, you walked into season 1 of The Ultimate Fighter, which I actually watched personally myself. I absolutely love that series. I was quite young at the time when that came out, but it was a great concept. Looking back though for you, do you think that you were kind of ready for what that experience eventually became? You was quite a big character on the show. Was you prepared mentally for what was to come from that?
The first Ultimate Fighter, I think, was kind of like like I describe it to people kind of like basic training or something. Like you're glad you did it. Wouldn't want to do it again. You know, obviously it was great for my career. Was I ready or was I prepared for it? You know, I think that's what made it awesome. Nobody was. Nobody was ready. Nobody was prepared. Nobody knew what to expect, you know, and that's what made the reality of it so raw, you know, and me being a kid from the other side of the tracks where I'm from, you know, bringing that in, you know, a lot of people, I think fan wise, a lot of people related to that. Personally, you know, for example, that's the first time I ever realized maybe I drank a little too much, you know, maybe I had a small substance abuse issue. You know, I remember going back with my friends and watching The Ultimate Fighter, and you know, when they do like the confessions where the guy's in the room with the camera by himself, they're all going, Chris Lieben's out here getting blasted. He might be fighting tomorrow. You know, this is the biggest opportunity of his life. I don't know what he's thinking, you know. And to me, you know, I just drank and behaved like everybody else that I grew up around. You know, I drank no differently than anybody else in my family. You know, and with the friends that I grew up with, you know, like peeing on somebody's bed, you know, because they pissed you off. That wasn't unheard of. You know, that was just like the kind of stuff that you did, you know.
I mean, would you do it differently if you did it again? Because, you know, at the end of the day, you know, won some amazing fights during the show, and maybe your behavior was, you know, one of the reasons why you got so recognized from the show.
Well, yeah,
but
I mean,
you know, do you watch it now and cringe, or you know, is it kind of like
I do. I try not to watch it, but when clips pop up, which they always do on my on my Instagram feed or whatever, you know, I cringe. But you got to remember, I was 21, 22. I'm about to be 45 now. This show was a long time ago. You know, I was a different person then. You know, and a life in combat sports, a life in the gym pulled me away from that person that I was and made me into the person that I am today, you know, which I'd like to think, you know, slightly more cultured, maybe a little bit more refined, not so rough around the edges. You know, it was the show originally was raw, the format of it. And, you know, me, not just me, but everybody else that was on the show too. None of us knew what to expect. And we all kind of came in bringing, bringing our neighborhood and our history and our past with us, you know, and I think that's what makes that series, not just even season one, but every one of those seasons, great. I think, you know, at this point, it's now the longest running. I think Cops is the only other reality show that's ever ran longer than The Ultimate Fighter. You know, the success that it was, it's amazing. And I think, you know, through the 28 series or however many there are, I think every person would probably tell you there's things they would do different, you know, if they were to go in now versus when they went in originally.
Yeah. And you mentioned just then that, like, you saw, you know, watching it back, you kind of saw that, you know, you did have some issues with alcohol and things, and it was probably being abused, you know, and your success after the show doesn't, you know, automatically mean that that's stability for you. You know, your massive rise came with, you know, some real darkness and all of that underneath. And what we actually saw is, like, as your career progressed, drug and alcohol, you know, if anything, got heavier, if you agree. But is there a point at which you kind of realized, you know, this is out of control, you know, and there's a point for you where the light bulb came on and, you know, you thought this has got to change?
I mean, yeah, you know, there were some embarrassing moments. There were some hard moments in my career. You know, there were some, you know, some things, you know, ultimately for me, you know, I talk a lot about, whenever I'm talking to a group or telling my story, you know, when it's really focused about recovery, I usually tell them, you know, about my last UFC fight and how, for example, I quit on the stool. And, ultimately, if you ask anybody on the street, and they want to tell you one thing about Chris Leben, most of them will go, well, man, that guy would die out there. Didn't matter if he won or lost. If he was fighting, you knew it was going to be a battle,
Mm.
And my last fight, I didn't even, I just didn't get up to answer the bell. I wasn't knocked out. I wasn't choked out. And that was extremely hard for me. Because, of who I valued myself to be, of who in my eyes I had told myself I was, that I was this warrior that would die before they quit, but, the little bit of redemption to that is, ultimately down the road, when I did get sober, I came back and I had those 4 or 5 bare knuckle fights. And, I had one fight where, in the first round, I got my orbital broken. Ultimately I had like 30 something stitches here, 20 stitches here. They had to sew my nose back on, and I fought from bell one to the fight. The judges gave the fight to the other guy. But when people ask me what my most rewarding fight is, that's the one. Even though I lost, the fact that I was able to go back out there and show the world what kind of person Chris Leben is, when you took the drugs and alcohol away, that's, in my opinion, what made me quit on the stool. That's not really who I was. That was that other stuff, talking and affecting my behavior.
Yeah. Because one of the things you see on the show is that you're able to drink one night and then get up and fight the next day. So did that almost seem like normal and make it easier and more normalized for you? Because, if I have a skinful, there's no way I'd get in an octagon the next day. I'd be KO'd. So did that make it almost worse or easier for you to fall into this?
I think so. I think I romanticized it, I guess. Like there was a run on the show, a test that we all did that Randy had us do. And I remember Randy told Dana nobody would pass this test. It was set up for failure, and I drank a fifth of booze and then finished the run. And I was the only guy out of everybody, there was other guys on the show that were just taking all their supplements and living on asparagus and nothing else, and, they didn't finish the run. And I finished the run because, I always like to tell people, my coach told me once, he said, when I couldn't run anymore, he said, I bet if a lion jumped out behind you, you could run a little faster, and I always kind of tell myself that, that it was just mental. It was all just mental. And I think some of that is true. But yeah, definitely to answer your question, the fact that I was able to perform, at least in my younger years, that I was able to perform, I wasn't causing any harm. I like to tell myself that story.
Yeah. And at the time, MMA and the UFC was like growing really fast. And you and the team of the Ultimate Fighters were all kind of in the forefront of that. Do you think the support system was there though? Because obviously, a lot of the time when something's new or if there's not a lot of funding behind it, there's also not a lot of support in terms of someone getting hold of you and saying to you, your drinking is in excess, and if you want to make a success of this. But also, if the support was there, do you think you would have listened to it at the time?
Yeah, I was going to say, people tried. People tried for sure. And listen, when it comes to addiction, you're not ready till you're ready. That's just the truth. I think I wasn't ready. Maybe the UFC was younger. And yes, they didn't have as many tools as a company as they do now. But I certainly had people around me that loved me and cared about me. And I had a lot of teammates. Nate Corey is a great example. He was on the Ultimate Fighter with me, and that guy was in my ear every day going, what the fuck are you doing? God, Chris, this is the biggest opportunity of your life. He didn't understand where I was coming from. He tried to help, but, he didn't battle with addiction. So he didn't understand, what I was going through. And, at that time, I maybe didn't know how bad the problem was. So I as well didn't understand the damage that I was doing, not just to myself, but to everybody around me.
Yeah. And you said in one of the answers before that, you think fighting saved your life. But when you're going through all of this and there were suspensions for steroids, painkillers, you got arrested. How bad did it get before it was the lowest point? And was there a moment that you thought, I'm not actually going to make it out of this?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lifetime is a long time. There were several lowest points, and there were several attempts at cleaning up. There were several attempts at doing some controlled drinking. I first started with saying, I'm just, I tried it all, man. I'm just going to drink beer. I'm not going to drink liquor. I'm just going to drink liquor. I'm not going to drink beer. I'm not going to drink till after this time. I'm only going to drink on the week. You name it. I did everything that I possibly could to try to manage, because I didn't know how I was going to have fun without it. That's what I was taught. The way that I was brought up that was the way that you enjoyed yourself, Otherwise, you were working or you were drinking. Those were your two options in life, and that actually ended up being a battle for me because once I did get sober, I had to figure out how to relax, how to calm down, and without needing a manual off switch, if that makes sense. For me, that alcohol was that. It was that it's time to relax. It was that physical switch I could turn. To switch gears. Till eventually it became not even that. I had to till eventually got to the point where I had to drink just to deal with people and social settings and everything else, but I don't know. I think maybe I got away from your question a little bit.
No, that's cool. So I mean, I come to the kind of more like the end of your career in terms of the fighting. Dana White called you and told you to retire, as far as I understand from doing the research. How was that conversation? And do you think that was almost a relief for you, or was you not ready?
It was shortly after my fight, maybe 5 days or a week after my fight. And I was still on such a low from having just quit and not gotten beaten, that, I very simply said, yeah, okay, no problem. Dana White would have called me a month later, I think this is, my answer may have been different, but because he called me, just 4 or 5 days after my fight, and I was still so depressed for my performance and my decision to not answer the bell, that I was just like, yeah, okay.
So, I mean, looking back at that as well, like at the version of yourself then, the one on drugs, angry, fighting demons, what would you say to him now? Is there something that you would say to him that you think he would listen to?
I my answer would be, listen, you can stop now or you can stop later. It's just the answer. It's just the question of how much pain do you want to endure, And I like to tell people that I have a high pain tolerance, and I think that, when it came to getting sober, it took a lot. I really had to get beat down multiple times before I got to the point where I was like, this can't go on. This can't continue.
Yeah. So talking about your reinvention now, so we'll talk about more of the sobriety side of things. You've been sober for over 7 years now. So congratulations, first of all, on that one. It's a massive time to stay away from that, and a huge achievement for you personally. What was the turning point for you? What finally made you say, what, my relationship with alcohol and drugs is done. This is me now.
At the end of my drinking career, it wasn't fun anymore. I wasn't in the UFC anymore. I had gotten fired from a couple different gyms in San Diego for drinking or doing things like slapping my boss, stuff you can't do, that I probably wouldn't have done if I was sober. And, I'd also gotten into some trouble with the law, and, a lot of people think, they'll tell you jail doesn't work. Well, listen, jail worked for me. I got in there and I was like, this shit sucks. I don't want to be here, you know? Ultimately, I wanted to have a life, you know? I wanted to have a life after fighting. I thought that my life was dead after fighting, you know? But you know, I have 7 years of continuous sobriety, but my journey started far before that. Like I said, even in my UFC career, I tried controlled drinking and different means to, you know, stop. I had some bouts of sobriety. But when I first took, you know, getting sober seriously was probably closer to like 9 or 10 years ago. You know, I got a year and a half, and then I got a year, drank for 2 days, and then started over. So, you know, I think that, you know, we all have our tipping point, you know, and you have to reach that tipping point, and you have to do it on your own. You know, people that love you and care about you can give you all the advice in the world, but until somebody's ready, they're just not, they're not ready, you know, and thank God in my case, that point came. That point came because, you know, I remember laying on my couch and just thinking like my phone wasn't ringing. You know, nobody wanted to hang out with me anymore. I was too much of a liability. I wasn't in the UFC anymore, so I wasn't the cool dude on the block, you know. And I was drinking by myself. And I was like, this is lame. This sucks. You know, I got to do something. So I started going to there was an AA meeting down the street from my house. And I would just go there. There was a noon meeting. I would go at noon by myself. I would just go. I'd go to the meeting. I'd sit there. I wouldn't say anything. And then I would go home, drink some more, and go to work. I did that for quite a while until I finally found a sponsor. I started working the steps in the program, got some sobriety, ultimately found another sponsor, the same sponsor I have today, ultimately, who's one of my best friends in the whole world. You know, and we got to work, you know, and since that point, my life has been just absolutely incredible. You know, I have a 7-year-old in the living room that's never seen me drunk. You know, my body, you know, I tried to go back and fight in Bellator, found out that I'd done all the drinking and everything else had done damage to my heart. Ultimately was able through, you know, taking a lot of herbs and everything else, but also, you know, more important than what you put in is what you don't put in, you know, taking that bad stuff out, you know, slowly but surely, you know, my heart improved and got better and better and better till I remember one day the cardiologist was like, yeah, you are, you know, you're back to the level that any man of your age should be at as far as your ejection fraction and your heart goes. And, that ended up being about the time that the BKFC or bare knuckle called me, you know, and I was back to training hard again. I was coaching and training hard, and I was beating up all the 20-year-olds in the gym. I had found this new fire for the sport that I love, for combat sports. I had found this new, you know, this energy, you know, not being hungover. And, you know, I was loving coming in and training, and, you know, they offered me some fights. And, you know, I was able to go back, and I think I had 4 fights. 3 of them were first round knockouts, you know, and one of them was the 5-round war that I talked about, you know, so not that you can ever right or wrong, but, you know, I was able to kind of rewrite the ending of my combat sports career, you know, and for me, that was huge. And then after that, you know, was able to find people that trusted me, you know, and helped me open my own business. So I have a gym here in San Diego, a striving gym where we do boxing, kickboxing, jiu-jitsu. You know, we've got a couple hundred members, you know, and that's like it's like my family, you know. Maybe I didn't have the biggest family growing up, but, you know, I have a huge family now. Not only do I have my friends that are in recovery, and all those people I hang out with, but I have my gym, and I spend every day trying to help people, whether they're just trying to lose weight or they want to be the next world champion. They're in the gym, they're sweating, and I try to sneak in my little motivational talks, into the technique. And last but not least, I'm a referee and a judge professionally for both boxing and MMA. So like weekend before, I guess it's Monday now, so weekend before last, I worked the Jake Paul fight. I'm continuously at the apex for the UFC. I get to watch the best fights in the world, and they trust me enough to decide who the winner is. And that's a big responsibility. That's a big job. So I've been able to earn all that trust that I lost. I've been able to earn it all back.
Yeah.
And not only that, but because of everything that I went through, it puts me in a unique situation to where when I'm in the gym and I'm talking to these 20-year-old kids, they listen to me. When I'm out and I talking to people that are struggling with substance abuse, maybe they won't listen to their counselor or their probation officer, but you know what? They listen to me,
Yeah.
So it gives me that opportunity to give back, not that, like I said, not that you can ever right or wrong, but if I wouldn't have gone through everything that I went through, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. And that little fact adds some reassurance, to me. It adds some reassurance, that I'm on track, and
yeah. So, sobriety's brought you a lot of different things, not just in the fighting, coaching, but, in personal life and all sorts of things. So it's really good to see you've got to that point that you are now. Kind of reading forward and talking about the space that you've created, but also the recovery and healing side of this podcast. It'd be good to know actually kind of what your recovery looked like when you were fighting. So, we will get onto what you're doing now and how you're helping other fighters and your gym and stuff. But did you have a bit of a protocol back when you were fighting? Did you use tools? Was there something you kind of swear by?
Throughout my career, luckily, early on, I had Randy Couture, who was, like a mentor to me, and he was my coach, and he was already 40 something years old and fighting, so he took really good care of himself, and so I had that to, I got to watch him, and I got to begin to emulate him and see how he kind of. What he did to keep the car on the road, and so early on in my career, it was really diet, diet was kind of the main thing, but I was never good at it. I would let myself get so fat in the off season that literally my training camp sometimes would be more about making weight than actually preparing for the fight. So it wasn't until years later I realized how important keeping that weight down was, so that I could feel good when I was training and I was preparing for the fight, and my output could be higher. Because it's hard to have much of an output when you don't have any calorie input.
Yeah, for sure. So coming on to the PEMF, was it during your how did you first come across PEMF? Because everyone's got a kind of a story as how to stumble across it or when they've ever used it themselves. Was that during your fighting career or after you'd kind of stepped away from the competing?
I wish it would have been around for me in my fighting career a little more. I know that PEMF kind of has been around for a long time. It kind of there was a guy, a strength conditioning coach that I worked with named Joel Jameson, who was the first one to introduce me to it. And I used it a few times through him with great results. But back then there were no units that were reasonably priced. It was a hard tool to get your hands on.
Yeah, sure. So what were the first things you noticed as well? What were you using for? Was it injuries or was it, more like performance?
So I originally in injuries, and because I'm talking about 20 years ago, 15 years ago. Um, Later on, when I came back to BKFC, and I was a little older, a little wiser, I had what's called an earth pulse, I guess. Are you familiar with that unit?
Yeah.
It kind of goes under your bed when you sleep, and that's supposed to help charge everything up, but not so much for specific injuries as but I use that, and I thought it helped me sleep. I thought it helped me sleep quite a bit better. I had the PEMF under my bed along with a bunch of magnets, so that really kind of, you're probably better at explaining all the science to what's going on there, but that really, it helped my sleep. It helped my recovery as well. Also, grounding sheets are something that I've used, and now I have I have an Aura unit here at home that I use regularly.
Yeah. And so initially using it for sleep and that sort of thing, did you use it on any injuries? And did you find that, it kind of like sped that process up compared to what you would, the ways you would normally heal?
So as far as injuries, I have, I got a lot of them.
Yeah, not surprising.
My knees are good. Everything else is bad in my body. Easier just to tell you what's left that's good. Surprisingly enough, I got through my career with no knee surgeries, which is pretty rare. But I got a bad hip. I got two shoulders that are messed up. C1 through C7 are all herniated in my neck. So I'm frequently using PEMF for all those areas.
And you've got a high intensity device at your gym. What are you using it mainly for your fighters? Are you getting them to use it daily, or is it more of a maintenance performance? Or again, are you kind of like really sticking it to them when they're using it for injuries?
We use it mostly for injuries. A couple guys have went out and gotten units, but again, they're still not cheap. Even an at-home unit. So the guys that can afford one have gotten in-home units that can use it more for maintenance. But injuries. Usually guys get hurt on the mat, and we'll get them right on it. They'll come right off I just hurt my ankle. You know what I mean? We're gonna come right off the mat and put them on that almost immediately.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And we saw on your Instagram posts, you kind of saying that, any of these elite gyms, that sort of thing, like, why haven't they got a PEMF device? Because it's non-invasive, it's, and is that still how you look at it? This is a therapy that should be everywhere?
I think so. I think 100%, it's, there's no, you don't have to continually buy new stuff. You get one machine, and you're set. You can take care of all your athletes that way. Definitely an investment that's worth, any gym is worth them making that investment for sure.
Yeah. And the high intensity one you got at your gym tends to be the more expensive device. Are you still using your low intensity ones for sleep and that sort of thing, or are you kind of just sticking to one now?
I just stick to one now. Well, my low intensity one, I loved it. And then what happened is it broke. I got another one. And then that one ultimately ended up breaking a year later. So I'll probably have to go out and get a third one.
Right. Well, I'll have to talk to you about the Accelerate. We'll send you one of those.
It works great. I'll have to ask you which product you recommend best for the low intensity. Or when it comes to mats and whatnot, something that I can use, for a longer duration of time. Because they're for the regular world, they're expensive.
Yeah, for sure. And the combination of both low and high intensity is also really beneficial. So yeah, don't worry, we'll hook you up. We'll sort you something out.
There we go.
Talk to you after this one.
There we go. Perfect.
So something else, with the PEMF side a little bit, you've talked quite a lot about is sauna. You use a portable dry sauna that gets up to 185 degrees Fahrenheit. But we saw that you weren't very impressed with the infrared one. What for you kind of clenched it? Why do you prefer the traditional sauna over the infrared?
Well, all the studies are on, dry sauna, and they're talking about. It's actually, I was at a barbecue the other week, and I ran into Southern California. I ran into Dr. Rhonda Patrick, and yeah, I sat there and talked to her for 40 minutes about creatine. But a lot of she was on Joe Rogan talking a lot about a lot of the studies. And when it comes to the heat shock proteins and everything, and all that stuff is all those studies are done, the drop in all-cause mortality, everything else, that's all done on dry saunas. Infrared saunas, as best I can tell, is just theory. It's just theory. Hey, these waves go deeper into you. We think they burn the fat a little better because they go in. But we don't know. So in my opinion, why wouldn't you go for the tried and true, option, the one that's been tested and verified?
Yeah, exactly. And I think where the infrared is such a newer technology, like you say, it's lacking a lot more evidence, peer-reviewed results and all that sort of thing. So,
and I'll speculate here, but I think ultimately down the road, what you're going to find is they're going to have different sets of benefits, so you may end up wanting to use both, but you're going to use them for different things, I think.
Yeah, sure. And outside of PEMF and sauna, are there any other tools that you're using regularly that you swear by, either on yourself or on your fighters and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I got a few others. I got behind this sauna, I got an ice bath over here. I hate it.
Doesn't everyone?
I absolutely hate getting in, but I love getting out. You know what I mean? I love getting out, and when it comes, I think for me the ice bath, instant. It's instantly I feel better. If I go out at my age and I do a bunch of jiu-jitsu, I had open mat for 4th of July. I did, I think, like 10 6-minute rounds. Got home, couldn't barely walk. I flop in that thing for 4 minutes, and I get out, and all of a sudden my neck's turning again. That inflammation just gets sucked out. I think that is phenomenal. And I just got a new massage chair. As a matter of fact,
nice.
Say what you want, but I think there's a lot of benefits when it comes to not just circulation, everything else. I think massage is great. One problem that I have with my busy schedule is that scheduling a massage and taking an hour out of my day to drive somewhere and go in, can be very difficult. Having a really high quality massage chair at home allows me that I can just come home and I can jump in that thing for. If I got 20 minutes in my day, I can jump in that and get some sense of relief.
No, that's good, and that's the thing. A lot of the time, it comes down to time and what people have got to put forward for these type of therapies and technologies. Last question, really, for me is, you've had a couple of close calls now with, quite a serious heart condition that you've been diagnosed with. You got COVID pretty badly. Does that play into how seriously you recover now? And has it changed the way you take care of your body longer term?
It does. It does. I've learned over the years to be gentler and a little more patient, with my body. Something that's been hard for me, especially after a career of fighting. When you've got a date on the calendar and you got to be ready. You block things out. Your shoulders hurt. Oh well. And for me, that's kind of where a lot of these painkillers came from. Shoulders hurt. I don't have time to let it heal. I'll take this and I'll go get through training camp. I've had to learn to try to listen to my body. Sometimes it says we're not training hard today. You know what I mean? Sometimes it says today isn't the day to do heavy deadlifts. Even if it's on the calendar, it says maybe you're just on the Aerodyne for 30 minutes today. I always do something. I do something every day, no matter what. But what changes is the intensity. What changes is the intensity. of what I'm doing. Whether, you know, sometimes it might just be, you know, light jiu-jitsu rounds, you know, light rolls. Sometimes it might be light sparring. Every once in a while, they're few and far between now, but every once in a while, you know, I'll want to go hard, you know, and I know it's a sacrifice. I know if I go hard, if I'm going to go out and I'm going to do 5 hard jiu-jitsu rounds with a tough D1 wrestler, you know I'm going to be beat up the next couple days. Same thing with striking. If I'm going to go out and do hard striking rounds, I can do it. You know, I just can't do much the next couple days. So it's a trade-off. So I have to constantly find that balance, you know, between keeping the car on the road, you know, performing and you know, and what I can and can't do.
No, cool. Thank you so much for that. And thanks for your time today, Chris. For anyone that wants to reach out with you, if they want to train with you, learn more about recovery methods, or just, you know, follow what you're doing, where's the best place for them to find you?
Easy is Instagram. You know, Chris Leben MMA on Instagram. They can reach out to me. www.thetrainingcentersd.com is my gym. The gym is on YouTube. It's on Instagram. It's on Twitter. It's on, you know, everything else. So if you guys look up the training center, if you want to come in and train, but particularly if you want to direct message me or something, like I always say, anybody that's struggling with recovery, you know, I will give them the best advice possible. Just DM me. DM me. I will get back to you. It might take me a day, but I will absolutely get back to you and give you the best advice possible.
Amazing. And thanks for listening to today's episode. If you've enjoyed it, please subscribe, leave us a 5-star review on your favorite streaming platform, wherever you're listening to. It really helps us get more great guests like Chris Leben to share, you know, their knowledge with you, and we can get more on here. So thanks again for your time, Chris.
Awesome. Thank you, man. Thanks for having me.